WinS Network site. So by staying on the call, we understand that you provide your consent for the recording and sharing of that material. Before we begin, I am Marge Lim of the WinS Network Secretariat. I have the pleasure of welcoming you all to this session on the global impact study of the Washington School's three-star approach. We encourage you to actively engage through the chat box as you can see the title of this whole webinar series being organized by the Washington Schools Network is Chat, Listen, Exchange. So we really encourage exchange between the presenters and all between the presenters and you as the audience, also within the participants. So yeah, we will have time later on for questions and further exchange, sharing of ideas. Without further delay, allow me to introduce our main presenter and facilitator for today, Belinda, who many of you would probably already know. So Belinda Abraham is an American, national, and international development specialist with over 20 years experience in the WASH and education sectors in sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. She has worked with UNICEF, GIZ, and several international NGOs in 7 countries, and she is currently based in Berlin, Germany, supporting the Global Washington Schools Network, Secretariat, and Viva Con Agua in institutional fundraising for their projects in both Africa and Asia. Without further ado, I turn over to you, Belinda. Please take the floor.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to now share my screen, so hopefully that comes out with the subtitles. So here we go. And I'm assuming you can all see it. Let me just move it here to title. Can you just, Marge, can you let me know if you can see?
Yes, you can see both the presentation and the subtitles. Yes.
Oh,
yes,
it's working. That's great. Okay, and I'm going to kind of move this out of the way so we can see. Okay, great. So thank you all and welcome to the presentation of the Global 3-Star Approach. And I saw a little bit in the chat box that some of my colleagues who actually were involved with this study are also on. So if you are one of those who were involved in the study, please kindly put up your virtual hand so people can see you. And at some point too, I saw Christina there for sure. But others might be there too. So please put your virtual hands up. And also, if you are part of the countries that took part in the study, whether it's Chad, Ghana, Kenya, please also put up your hands. Great. Thank you very much. Okay, so we will move straight ahead into the presentation. Let's see if we can get this going here. Here we go. Good. So the study team, as I mentioned, was quite a large study team. We did it for many reasons. Number one, because there are 12 countries which were going to be studied, which were part of the study. So we wanted the diversity that we could really get into and understand the country context, as well as to bring also different perspectives to the 3-star approach. And so we will move forward. The contents of this study, the contents of today's presentation are briefly to go over the study design. We will focus more of our discussion on the findings, lessons learned, success factors, and recommendations. And what I'm also hoping as a part of the presentation is there will be a time where we're just going to kind of stop and allow different countries to share their experiences with aspects of the 3-star approach. And I know that the team from Uganda has prepared something, so I really want to give them some time. I know Ellen in Ghana is also there, might be also some others. So really welcome the time to kind of reflect on the 3-star approach in your country context. So the 3-star approach explained, I think perhaps I could do it, but perhaps the best person to do it is actually Bella Munz. And Bella, I'm going to put up the full slide. I'm going to put up the slide. And then maybe Bella, you can just give us first the kind of the theory part, not the theory part, but what is the three-star approach before we go into the study, which actually then starts to look at it as an impact. Bella, are you with me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay,
Okay,
perfect.
I was not thinking of being
Oh,
pulled in, but it's okay. I'm fine. Yeah,
okay.
perhaps just it's also nice. It's a bit more interactive. So thanks,
I thought
Belinda,
so.
for calling me in here. Yeah, the three-star approach was developed quite a few years, really nearly 10 years back, when there was really and this question is still there, that as we all know, schools, the reality in schools is that many schools cannot really reach national standards. They're very often national standards or policies which have a very ambitious national standards, which schools have difficulties to reach. There was the big question: how can schools, with reality, with having no or limited access to water and toilets, lack of hygiene behavior, and always the question of having no funds, how can they reach the national standards, which should be also linked to the SDG standards? So how can they get there? And the big question was how to reach this. And the idea was then to go with a stepwise approach, not thinking that you can jump from very difficult conditions, which very often paralyze the school heads or the Ministry of Education people working on school level. How can they really reach these standards? And perhaps next slide,
Okay,
Belinda,
Bella,
I think then, yeah.
yeah, just 2 seconds, because I think I want to see if the translation is back. Yeah. Just for those again, on our website now, you can download the presentation in French. I forgot to mention this. So for those who are struggling to follow along in French, we do have the complete presentation translated, so you can download that. But just to quickly say here, repeat again, Bella, because I have the subtitles in my text. Once again, that this is just to look at the reality in schools is that many don't have access to water, lack of sanitation, and poor funds. Three-star approach is a way to help get there. Next, so I'll move on to the next slide. Thanks, Bella. Continue.
Okay. Yeah, and the way we did it then was really thinking of doing certain steps. How can schools really get from the reality to those national standards? And there was always the point to say how to get schools getting into the journey and breaking it down to steps and putting as the first step as something what schools can really do with the resources they have at hand. So improvement with resources available at school level, which might be not a lot, but you can start to clean, you can start to collect the garbage. So carefully develop a culture of cleanliness. And that's the first step. That was the idea. Or get into healthy routines. There is not the definition of what is per country. The first step is something, this is defined on country level, while the second step already would use some more incremental improvements, looking a bit into how could you perhaps get some resources, and you get some resources from the community, or how could you get incremental improvements, including improvements in the infrastructure. And the third step would be meeting the national standards. But all of this, which star you are reaching, needs that on country level there is a categorization of stars, of the different star levels. And these are just the principles which you see here. The principles of improvement with resources available, incremental for the second star, and then meeting the national standards as the third star. And for all of that, you need an underlying monitoring system. And now back to Belinda. Sorry, I hope I
No, very
explained it.
good. I always think it's best to get it from the source. But I mean, the main point here, of course, is to say that it is a stepwise approach to reach national standards, and that it has to be linked to a national monitoring system. So with that, we can go into now the actual global study and the study design, because that concept needs to be understood first before we move into the study itself. Thank you, Bella. So the aim of the study was really to examine the three-star approach as a tool to be used to advance Washington schools to meet the SDG targets, the Sustainable Development Goal targets. And so we looked at it from number one, which countries worldwide have adapted or implemented the TSA. We recognize that the three-star approach may not be the three-star approach everywhere. It might be called something else. For example, in India, they call it the five-star approach. And in Chad, they call it the flag approach. So every country has a different approach. So really trying to look at what is it? We had to kind of tease out what are the key core elements that call it a three-star approach. Then after we've identified those countries that have something like a three-star approach, we then said, what is the degree to which it's been institutionalized? And then what kind of monitoring systems are being used to support it, as well as what has the impact of the TSA had on COVID-19 response measures. So we did this through a four-step methodology. Number one, as I said, to identify the countries who have implemented TSA. And in the next slide, I will explain how we define TSA. We assess the degree of institutionalization by using the enabling environment matrix. Many of you who attended last 2 weeks ago, the webinar, we focused on this enabling environment matrix. And then we identified 12 countries. We really wanted a geographical scope, so we identified the countries all the way from Asia to Latin America. And then we looked at what the different countries were doing. We consolidated them for analysis in the last phases. Now, as we mentioned, what we realized is from the original field guide, and many of you are aware of this 2013 field guide, the three-star approach for Washington schools, which was developed in collaboration between GIZ and UNICEF, with kind of the founding document. And it's, I mean, Bella, you will also say, and I agree, it needs to be updated, but very much at the time, it was really this idea of how do we get schools to move and schools to just go step by step on it. And then what we saw is different countries in different ways took their approach and adapted it. So we saw that in the Philippines with the national guidelines. We see it in India with the five-star approach, the clean schools. We saw Cambodia with the minimum requirement guidelines, and we see it in Fiji. But there are many other country examples. So how did we define the three-star approach for our study, recognizing that not every country is going to call it the three-star approach? We started with the presence of a benchmarking system linked to a national monitoring system with clear indicators. So it means that there's some steps, they have some sort of steps that are saying, okay, this is this 1-star because the schools have this. This is a 2-star, or this is a second step because, so we looked for that presence of a benchmarking system. We also looked like it wasn't just a benchmarking to get to here, but it was an incremental one so that there was a stepwise approach. And then the third point we looked for is a presence of some sort of accreditation recognition mechanism. So there was some sort of award when schools went up the steps. When we saw any of those three present things, then we said, aha, that is considered a 3-star approach. And I would say, according to kind of our literature and review, over 50 countries would be doing something like a 3-star approach. So then after identifying the 3-star approach, we looked also to see how this 3-star approach is then integrated in the enabling environment framework. So what does that mean? So for example, does when they had the 3-star approach, were they asking questions around, do they have a WinS policy? Were there implementation arrangements? Were there budget? Because very much we were able to then sort of see to what extent that three-star approach was actually integrated into the wider systems. So it's not just a pilot project or project on the side, but it's something that's actually integrated into the programming. So references within the policy included a stepwise approach, or they had implementation arrangements within Ministry of Education, led by Ministry of Education. So those were the second level of investigation. Based on that, and with lots of fun, we identified 12 countries, and these countries were Cambodia, Chad, Fiji, Ghana, Honduras, India, Jordan, Kenya, Nepal, the Philippines, Tajikistan, and Uganda. So let's get to the findings. We soon learned that the three-star approach, like any innovation, is very much influenced by various stages. And so we were very much inspired by the innovation diffusion theory by Professor Rogers, which goes back way back when in 1962, and basically said that, you know, over time, there's sort of a beginning stage, an introduction stage to innovation. So if you think of the TSA as an innovation, there's an introduction stage, then there's a stage where it's really taking off, and then there's an established phase. And we kind of like that thinking. It was very much brought in by Jose. So we said, let's see the countries, these 12 countries, in that way. And so in doing so, we were then able to kind of group the countries. And interestingly, we then were able to then pull out characteristics about the various countries, the introduction, takeoff, and established phases. So you see here, Ghana, Honduras, Kenya, and Tajikistan were considered introduction phases. Takeoff phase, we said Chad, Fiji, Jordan, Nepal, and Uganda. And established phase were Cambodia, India, and the Philippines. And I'll explain why. So when we say established, let's start with established. Established countries, in terms of TSA, had them institutionalized in at least 4 out of the 5 enabling environment blocks. Those blocks that I showed you, the policy, the capacity. Policy planning, it was integrated. You saw reflections of the three-star approach there. So it was an incremental, stepwise. It was very much linked. Each of the stars were very much linked to the monitoring and their overall monitoring framework. There was self-monitoring being done in the schools. There were clear implementation arrangements within Ministry of Education as a lead ministry. The capacity building was institutionalized, so Ministry of Education understood their role as to promote WASH in schools, to implement WASH in schools. So therefore, teacher training, massive extensive training was included, as well as the monitoring indicators were not just monitoring indicators on the side, they were actually linked into the EMIS, the Education Management Information Systems, or school census, and there were core questions. The 6 core questions in the SDGs were part of that. So it's very much linked. And I want to then draw your attention to this fact that as a result of this integrated programming, you see that there's actually information for the JMP data. We actually have data in these schools, in these countries about all the schools. And in the case of the Philippines, even though it is a voluntary, you find over 90% of the schools are engaged in it. So you have very good data on the schools, and you also are able to monitor, and the ministry is also able to put their attention where those areas are needed. The other thing we saw is it's not only adopted at national level, but it actually goes all the way down to subnational level. And very interestingly enough, that all of these countries are on track to meet one or more of the SDG. And it's not they were on track before. We, as the researchers, strongly believe that because of the strengths in their monitoring systems linked to the TSA, they were able to take much more, I would say, pointed or timely efforts to address this. And so therefore, we see a correlation between the TSA and the country's ability to monitor, which also supports their advancements in SDGs. The takeoff countries, we see, if you look at this picture, you see less data. So there's obviously less integration of the TSA in the national monitoring systems. However, what we do see is some positive momentum in terms of policy and also implementation arrangements and as well capacity building. So all of these countries have some form of a national WinS policy led by the Ministry of Education with some reference to the TSA, with the exception of Fiji, which has yet to, at least the time 2022, had yet to have that endorsed. Perhaps by now Fiji it's been endorsed, but Fiji did have it clearly integrated into their EMIS and monitoring systems. Collectively, though, they lacked two main drivers, I would say, would be really the strong political will and really having strong champions to push it through within the ministry. It's there, but it's not quite there. And they had yet to really mass dissemination of it at a national wide way. So I will go on to the next one. And then the takeoff, or the introduction countries, their commonalities, as you can see, there's again less data available. And we have quite a dichotomy, I would say, a difference between the two countries. We have two countries, Honduras and Ghana, which did not continue the TSA, and I'm glad Ellen is here to explain more. I think Pakwasi, you're also with UNICEF, is also here, so you can also explain some more. And then we have countries like Kenya and Tajikistan who are taking it forward, who have actually integrated it into their national policies or frameworks and are really trying to move it over. And I think the most learning was actually with this group. The reason why we say that is we realize the importance of the TSA, how it's introduced, how it's implemented, and how it needs to be adapted to a country context to make sure that it is, like any innovation, fit for purpose. And here is where we learned the most in terms of when and where TSA is best met. So I hope keep the comments coming in the chat box. I can't see them, but I'm hoping you are continuing the discourse. I am looking at the time and wanting to be, wanting to make sure we have a good time for discussion. So I'm going to move along now to talk a little bit about, I'm going to give some specific country examples, and then probably after that, close it a bit before we kind of wrap it up. But I want to just talk about some of the distinguishing factors again between TSA and WinS benchmarking systems. Because many schools have WinS initiative, many schools have competitions and contests, and that is not to say it's a good thing. It is very much a good thing. But the difference in many of those cases between that and what we call the 3-star approach is many of them are improvements which are done by development partners. They are not quite nationwide, and they're not integrated in the education management information system. It's really important that the initiatives, the benchmarking is very much aligned to the national system, and that the schools are being able to self-report, and that is then being used in the national system. So we see this, and so this kind of diagram shows many schools around the world, bigger fall in that. A little bit smaller group would be where Ministry of Education has actually started to benchmark. Schools are self-monitoring. It's still not nationwide, and it's not integrated into the EMIS. And the 3-star approach, which is the bullseye, is really around this benchmarking, incremental approach integrated into the education management system. It is led by Ministry of Education, and it is aligned to the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And that is, at the end of the day, ensures that what schools are doing is not only recognized, but it's also being supported by the Ministry of Education system. So I'm going to get into some country examples, and I know there are people on the line from Philippines. I saw Ubo is there and a few others. So please, again, punch in if some of the numbers are not correct in the chat box. Please reflect on that. I would love to hear from you. Philippines, we said, is an established country. You can see that it has a major achievements in terms of the training. The Washington schools training 34,000 school personnel and officials have been trained through the massive open online courses that are available and run by Ministry of Education. with support from development partners. GIZ is a key partner for this. As well, 93% of the schools actually participate in the monitoring. Look at the number, 45,000 elementary and secondary schools. And what was very interesting about it is because they had such good data, they were able to use that data to focus funding to poor performing schools, and it also influenced decisions on school reopening. Now, TSA was introduced in 2013, as you can see, but it wasn't actually fully adopted until 2018. It is completely integrated as a tool in all areas of programming. So looking at quality assurance monitoring, and also there is a huge portion about this is the recognition aspect. So recognition at subnational level achievements, so not just at school level, but looking at it from a regional perspective, and so forth. Therefore it is institutionalized in all the full system. When we talk about a system-wide approach, TSA is a tool that's used throughout the whole system. Challenges, though. There are too many indicators, and so many schools do still struggle to make the 1 star. So when you look at this star rating, you see 74% of the schools are doing action, which is really good, doable action. But few schools then move to be 1 star, 2 star, and 3 star. And so it really is maybe looking at perhaps, maybe again, Bella and others can speak to it during the round when we do a round of discussion. How can we make it so that schools can actually move to 1 and 2 stars? Chad, and Chad is the country that I had the privilege to kind of to investigate. And Chad had in 2019, so just before COVID, they had their strategy endorsed, which includes what they call the flag approach. And their flag approach is basically the orange flag. So if a school gets an orange flag, that means they've already started doable actions. When they make incremental approach and they've got clear indicators within the strategy, they get a yellow flag. And when they meet national standards, they get a green flag. Right now, it is not a national-wide program. There's about 3 or 4 NGOs which are implementing this. And World Vision is probably the largest NGO implementing this. And they said up to date in 2022, about 250 of the 450 schools that they were implementing had at least 1 orange flag. However, only 4 of the schools met the national standard. So that continues to be a challenge for them. But the importance here, though, is whilst it's been endorsed in the strategy, like many African and other countries, it is not well disseminated. So there's a lot of resources required for that. There's been really limited cascade training. It's still piloted by primarily NGOs. I would say from our review, it still lacks really full government buy-in. But the good thing about it is this strategy was developed following a national consultation and WASH in Schools bottleneck analysis. And that is that at least there was agreement on the situation. So that's why this tool was chosen to improve the situation. So moving forward. And then the last country we'll look at under the introduction groups to give you a little bit of what it looked like is Ghana. And I know Ellen from Ministry of Education is here. So Ellen and Pagosi, as I mentioned. But Ghana has done remarkable things around WASH in Schools. They have actually a framework which really addresses both SDG 4 and SDG 6. And it is very comprehensive, as you can see. Ghana has not implemented the TSA. It was introduced, but it wasn't implemented. And I think the line that we understood was it came into, this is where we talk about context. It came into it wasn't congruent or wasn't aligned to the national representation of the free primary education principles, which was that it was the state responsibility. The way TSA was introduced was more of a community, I guess, responsibility. I'll let Pakwasi and Ellen explain. And therefore, they said that it is our responsibility. So therefore, this approach is not the one we are going to take. However, notwithstanding that, they have taken a competition approaches where, for example, the Unilever Continental Partnership had the Tippy Tap project where it was in the north, and many schools were involved, and they did see a high uptake of hand washing through that approach. CRS has the best schools approach, which also takes a very incremental approach to it. But again, the difference is that this data is not, the data from these projects are not aligned to the EMIS system. It's not linked to, it doesn't ask the core SDG questions. And what we do see here, much like many of the countries in the introduction stage, is there are many donors and development partners doing different things. And so there's a bit of a misalignment with that. And then it's not integrated into the policies and plans, and also challenges of dissemination. So Ghana said no, Honduras said no, Kenya and Tajikistan are going forward with it and are integrating it into their policies. So let's go. So what are the lessons learned? And let me see, I'm keeping an eye on my time here. Number one of the main lessons learned after these 12 countries, and the full report will be available in 2 weeks. I'm doing no service to all the in this presentation. It's a big report. There's 12 country reports, and then there will be the main report, which is with GIZ being formatted. It is their property and ownership, but so it is going to be now put together in a line, and so that will be shared. But what are some of the lessons that we learned from that? Number one, the importance of context. Context first, from understanding the system, the enabling environment matrix, whether analysis or whether it's a WASH bottleneck analysis. It's very important to understand the context before the TSA is introduced, and also to have a very deep understanding of the Ministry of Education and their capacities. Because when you look at the Philippines, although it was introduced very early, there was a time, by the time it was fully endorsed, there was a time to actually build the relationship, understand it, so that the TSA was very much aligned to how the ministry works. And I think this is a very important point. So understanding the context of the country before. And that's probably a no-brainer for most of you here, but it is important because oftentimes we as development partners, for those of us who are outside of government, are really quick to push in an approach, but sometimes not completely understanding the context of which that ministry, and I'm saying Ministry of Education, more than Ministry of Health or any, but Ministry of Education works. Secondly, timing. It seems to be most effective when it's linked to following a bottleneck analysis, a systems strengthening evaluation or approach, and it is then aligned to sector planning and review processes. This is where we see that it can be more, the uptake of the TSA as an innovation, as a tool to be used, is best used then. Going back to the graph that Bella showed in the beginning, here's our situation, how do we get there? When you have a situational analysis and you look at that situation and you say, how do we want to get there? That's when a tool like this is best put in, because you can then sort of talk, okay, where do we want to be? Where do we want to see schools? And then they become stars, they become flags, they become approaches. And then training, but I don't want to see training in sort of, I would say capacity building is probably a better word for it, that it is integrated into the Ministry of Education system. So it's not just a one-off training here and here and here, but it's something that the Ministry of Education says, no, in order for us to implement, to reach SDG 4, we need investments in the capacities of teachers, of district officials, subnational officials, and so forth. And so it is an integrated learning initiatives. And examples like the international learning exchanges or mass open online courses, we actually could see that following these kind of major events, particularly the International Learning Exchange, you saw a much greater uptake in countries to take on the TSA approach, because they actually learned from another country and then they went back and were able to influence their countries to take it forward. And so we do see that it's also linked to timing too, but integrated training is important. So recommendations, and I have 4 minutes for this. So recommendations. Number one, we saw some of the six key success factors were, number one, that Ministry of Education was leading and there was clear responsibilities for them in WinS. We also saw, like in the case of India, high-level political will from the highest levels. I also saw in one case, you know, when you have somebody from the office of the prime minister or the president being part, you see TSA, you see actually WinS taking off. So high-level political will should and advocacy around Washington schools is a very, very key component. Number two, the presence or aligned of a WINS technical working group. Alignment is key. So if we are part of WINS, and again, I'm talking from a development partner's perspective, that we are aligning what we're saying, that we're working through the Washington Schools Technical Working Group and not working individually. And the stronger they were to come together, the more they were able to support the government in a coordinated fashion. And that's where it took off. And so you see that very nicely happening in Chad. You see that happening in Kenya and other countries where they're coming together to support the government. Multifaceted and a massive capacity development. So yeah, so not one-off trainings, but trainings which are integrated for all teachers. I love it in Malawi. They're doing now teacher training through the teacher training institutes, the TTC. And this is teacher training centers. This is key. Massive training for teachers is the only way to go, and not these one-off training. They're very expensive, and the dissemination is very low. Ensuring that there is national and subnational plans linked to a monitoring mechanism is key. So it can't just be in the plan, but it has to also have indicators and a monitoring mechanism in the plan. So we want to do 3-star approach is great, but what are the indicators alignment there so that you can keep accountability? And then transparency. When the data, when you see how many schools are 3-star, 2-star, whatever, that has to be transparently presented or available. And so where we see examples like in India, examples even in Cambodia, probably less so in Cambodia because it's more internal to the Ministry of Education, but even the Philippines, you can go online and see this data. And that also brings in a nice level of healthy competition amongst the schools, but also the regions. So if you are a country, you're a Ministry of Education, you're a development partner, you want to get started, what are some key rules we would say for the 3-star approach? Number one, policy. It is important that the focus with the ministry is within around the policy. If there isn't a WINS policy, perhaps better place efforts to work on establishing a policy and a direction. Number two, scale, keeping it very, very simple. And we saw in all cases simplicity scales. And in the sense that keeping the indicators fewer, keeping the actions, the communications simple, more people can understand it, more people can come on board. Alignment, work together. Going one NGO or one partner doing it by themselves is not the way to go. Trying to create a collectiveness with others around a systems approach is the only way if you want to see the scale. Exchange. International learning exchange, wonderful. Not all of us can go and do these things, but within the countries, even just exchanging information, sharing and learning, we saw this in different countries, that also strengthens it. And monitoring, measure to make it matter, but measure to get it done. I can hear Bella saying this too. It is important that the monitoring is integrated to this and that it is linked to the EMIS, but monitoring is key because it holds accountability. And lastly, coming from Viva Con Agua side, I must say, the fun part has to be there. So reward, recognize, celebrate the achievements because that gets more people interested and wanting to be part of it. So now I think, good, I made it. It's 9:45. I've spoke a lot. I haven't got to see the chat box, so I will welcome anybody to open up and say, but I would like to give this opportunity now to some of the countries that were involved in the study to share a little bit of their experiences. And if I can be so bold to start, because I know that Uganda did prepare something, can I ask the team from Uganda to unmute and share? And if you wish, I can also stop my screen share if you would like to share. So can I open it out for the team in Uganda and then others who are interested? I'm going to actually maybe for a minute stop the share. Let's see. Okay. Is there anybody who would like to share from the Uganda team or partners from Uganda? Yeah, I see. Is there anybody?
Hello?
Yes, hello.
Yes, this is Prosper Wamasaka.
Welcome, thank you.
Yeah, I'm manager education at KCCA, and I fully participated. Yeah,
Thank you very much.
I would like to express both our gratitude and the impression we got about the three-star approach. First of all, you realize that we were overwhelmed. The schools were overwhelmed by water and sanitation needs. And sometimes when people get overwhelmed, they even fail to do what they would be able to do. And the three-star approach really helped schools to plan, see all their needs, identify what they can handle at a time, and then plan for what they cannot handle at that time. But at least something was being done all the time. And then this approach involved everybody. The children were involved, the teachers were involved, and the head teacher was involved. So it was really interesting that everybody came into decision making, and everybody was really, really owning up. That was very interesting. When this approach came, we didn't know what was going to happen, but soon after, we got COVID. Actually, COVID found us much better prepared than it would be if we had not implemented the three-star approach. So it was very easy to implement the standard operating procedures for COVID. We were really, really, really very impressed, and I would like to appreciate especially GIZ, who worked with us to implement this approach. Maybe something else that we found very interesting, because ordinarily it's us inspectors who go to schools to tell people, do this, do that, don't do this. But this approach was a kind of non-directive approach. The school owns up. They do their assessment. They identify their needs. They think about their budget, and then they implement. It's their business. And when you come, they have already done your work. They are the real first inspectors. And when you go to the school, they want to impress you with what they have done, which is not the situation usually when we are doing inspection, because we've always been going there and then everybody is worried, everybody, but this time you find confident people who want to talk to you, who want to show you what they've done, which means that the school system is now proud of what they are doing. And we also got a lot of innovation. Schools use the music, There is a school which started a children's court, such that if anyone child breaks the rule, it's the children themselves to apprehend that child and then correct the behavior of the child and tell him what to do next. And the children are everywhere. So it means that the WASH guidelines will be followed better than when they are being implemented by adults or by teachers. I also want to point out that with the intervention of GIZ, of course, our toilet situation has really improved. Sometime back in 2017, our ratios were very high. Like we had one toilet to 110 children. Now we have come down to 1 to about 45. And the government expectation is 1 to 40. So we are actually doing very well. And we hope we shall be very soon getting there. Where we implemented, the enrollments improved because obviously children do not want to go to a school where toilets are dirty. Children are happier with a very clean school, especially with the toilets. So enrollments improved, and really children enjoy going to the toilet, you know. So that has been a very big achievement. And another very important achievement that I'm really proud of is that now the school takes responsibility for their sanitation without having to have anybody from outside to tell them what to do. Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to stop there.
No, thank you very much. And I think that you had a campaign, there was a name around the campaign as well. Do you want to explain a little bit? And I see, Alex, your hand is up too. So we'd like to explain a little bit about the campaign, because many countries we saw as part of the study often use campaigns like the Clean Water, Clean India. I can't say it in Hindi. Nepal, I don't know if Siddhi is here. Some others might use campaigns. So can you explain a little bit of how you kind of mobilized everybody under the campaign? And then Alex, you are next to speak. Yeah, please. And thank you very much for sharing what Kampala City did. Prosper, do you want to explain?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, or you put your hand, or is this your hand down? You want to put your hand down, or? Okay.
This is the campaign, the TMG campaign, the toilets making great.
Yeah, did you use a campaign to kind of get mobilized people around the 3-star, or was it just the 3-star approaches, or did you use like a campaign around it?
No, we didn't use a special campaign.
Oh,
we
okay,
used the 3-star approach.
Okay.
And we reached out to schools.
Okay.
The campaign is like our normal work which we do.
I see. Okay, very good. So it was very much integrated into the programming, and this is a very key point. Marge, I'm going to ask you to stop the share if you don't mind. I think it's because of yeah, it's a little bit slowing down. I think there's a couple hands. So, and I'm missing some here. So, John Bosco, please, you're welcome. And then Alex, you can both unmute. I think, Alex, you can go first.
Yes, this is Irene, not John Bosco.
Okay.
I'm using the laptop for John Bosco. Yeah,
Okay,
just a supplement on Prosper Wamasaka's submission. Thank you so much for sharing. The 3-star approach was integrated into the toilets making the grade school competition. So that was integrated in such a way that during the evaluation of the competition, they would use the 3-star matrix to evaluate the schools and as well monitor them. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very, very much. Alex? Hey, hi. Nice to see you. Um, we can't hear you, or at least I can't. So just want to try it again. And then I see from our side.
Okay.
Yeah, now I can hear you. Okay, perfect.
Thank you so much. Sorry for this.
No
So
problem.
what I want to say is now we heard toilets
Yes,
making
we can hear you.
integrated into three-star approach. So I just thought I'd take one quick word because I know the three-star approach in Uganda was implemented by different approaches or different aspects like peer-to-peer learning between headmasters, peer-to-peer learning between schools, improving the monitoring system, and probably Irene can talk much more about this. I'm from an NGO from Germany called German Toilet Organization, and we contributed the concept of the Toilets Making the Grade competition, which basically just helped to form interdisciplinary teams from pupils to cleaners to school management that made a self-assessment, and from that self-assessment they brought out their own challenges that they were solving with their own approaches. And as Irene said, these goals were set along the three-star approach. And yeah, I'll share a link in the chat just now if you wanted to know more. Sorry for intervening. I just
No. It's very good. No, it's very good to clarify, because I think what we wanted to kind of highlight here, that different countries took different approaches, and so it didn't all go. Some came very much from a integrated government approach. Others came through with development partners aligning and supporting and finding ways to support it. So I do think this clarification to understand that and to see where the country then takes off from there. I did see John from the Philippines, UNICEF. John, you can unmute and we'd love to hear from you. John?
Hello.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone from the Philippines. This is just to put some nuancing into the challenges in relation to having one of the challenges cited for the Philippines is having a lot of indicators and schools struggling to achieve them. Well, just to nuance the picture actually is that yes, there are many indicators in the system, and I'm just like talk about the system here only because we tried to break down everything into the simplest form actually. So one lesson here is that well, simplification does not mean you have too few indicators. The other way to simplify is actually to break them down into all these bits and pieces. Well, it does sort of present to the school like there's so many things that they have to achieve. But at the same time, one has to look at the data in the Philippines. Why there's just been 70, there's still 70% of schools still one star under the system that we have. One is that the data would show one of the key gaps is on gender segregated toilet, which is a it's a non-negotiable requirement to have to reach one star. That's the infrastructure side, and we say there's just like 65% of schools that have at least set of gender segregated toilets. And if you look at the data, of the schools that have no star, it's like only 50% have actually have gender segregated toilets. The other bigger challenge actually is daily group hand washing, the behavior side. And we particularly the experience in the Philippines shows that you cannot underestimate the behavioral component, because we challenge ourselves to go into the behavioral. The three-star approach should cover the behavioral component, and it's one of the key features is data is that only some 40% of schools in zero star who actually practice daily group hand washing, and broadly that's like some 60% of them forget the exact data. So the thing about this is that lesson one on infrastructure, though the responsibility has been given to the school, the national government cannot let go of things, cannot drop the ball, and has to provide direct investments into infrastructure, particularly for schools that really do not have are in resource scarce areas. The second and the context in the Philippines is that the education sector is centralized from the national down to the school level, and is not a responsibility of the local government unit, and that in itself limits the type of the sources of investment that can go into the school for infrastructure, with local government units saying it's not a responsibility to put in infrastructure into school. So that sort of limits that. And the second is that behavior we need that itself has to be particularly focused on. um the daily group hand washing is actually the when this three-star approach was being conceived. Murat Sahin at that time felt, where's the missing link? The missing link was the group hand washing. It's one of the main component that actually makes a three-star approach what it is actually, to have children have the opportunity to wash their hands on a daily basis, and everyone else have that opportunity. But it's not an easy thing to do, and there's much more beyond just having infrastructure for it. But there has to be this whole system for behavior change, and that we can never understate that as part of the scaling up the three-star approach and making it effective. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, John. I think you've highlighted some really, really key points. I think number one, the idea, it is at the end of the day the responsibility for the Ministry of Education. So this such a contest or whatever they decide to do, at the end of the day, there needs to be investment in infrastructure. There needs to be investment. There needs to be resources. And oftentimes the setup with local government doesn't allow that, or it should not be put onto local government. And I think there goes where probably next, what some of the recommendations actually of the report were also around the needing to focus on financing and sort of Washington school financing being another key step to be considered. So it's not only actions at schools, but also what can we do to support financing. And then the last point, which is around behavior change, which is absolutely critical. All of this is lost if the behavior change isn't there. And so how do we then integrate that into a three-star approach that is monitored and measured, and that those who are accountable to ensure behavior change are there? And I think it's all kind of the stepping stones. So I see that we've actually passed time, but great to see so many comments from Jordan. Thank you very much. From around the Jordan, and Jordan was one of the countries implementing the three-star approach and was also featured. Ghana, thank you, Ellen. I don't know if you can all spare a few minutes more as we close up. Ellen, did you want to speak, or did any other country? I see there might be a raised hand. I want to make sure we give everybody. Oh,
Hello.
Please, Nepal. Yes, please.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Please.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Yasnite. Yeah, welcome.
Yeah.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, Belinda, for organizing this meeting. Probably this is our honor to share something from Nepal. No?
Yes, please.
We circulated to many colleagues, and some of them, at least 10 persons, 10 people are participating in this
Perfect.
meeting.
Thank you. Welcome.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Just to let you know that Nepal started consolidating different approaches of washing school in 2018, and it was revised in 2019 in the form of washing school procedure that was approved by the Department of Education. And it was disseminated at the national level. Immediately after that, we had COVID that affected the implementation at a scale for more than 2 years. Even though there was COVID, but due to this dissemination and advocacy or information sharing with different washing school stakeholders, so far some 20 agencies are working on washing school aside from the government. Out of that, some 15 plus agencies are working on three-star approach. We had our own three-star approach. That means Nepal adapted this global three-star approach into the Nepalese context, and we come up with these 10 indicators. Out of that, 4 are related to infrastructures, 3 are related to behavior, and other 3 are related to this institutionalization. And we have been able to reach out to about 3,000 schools out of these 35,000, both government and these private schools. And during that time, government issued this wash in school procedure, but government had their own larger scale, the bigger scale plan, school sector development plan that ended in 2022. And recently, Ministry of Education come up with a school education sector plan for 10 years, no, from 2022, 23 to 2030, 31. And we have been able to include these wash in school as one of the cross-cutting area in that school education sector plan. Earlier as well, those parts were there, but those were most predominant in health and nutrition strategy. You know? That is the focus of the government at that time. Uh, while formulating this school education sector plan for these 10 years, we have been able to include these indicators, is this three-star approach in the government, this larger plan. And we have also come up with the targets for this basic as well as advanced. In case of advanced, no, three-star approach that is approved by Department of Education will be the basis. Therefore, while attending this ILE in 2022, we also presented our draft action plan. And recently, on 27th of this month, we all the stakeholders came together in the leadership of the government and just come up with the detailed action plan. Out of that, what were the gaps that is seen in enabling environment metrics where have been turned into the action plan. Most importantly, this roadmap as well as alignment of these EMIs, these government, these previous EMIs, updating these previous EMIs in line with this SDG, and Department of Water Supply or Ministry of Water Supply is also just taking wash in school information while formulating wash plan of the local government. Therefore, we are trying our best to harmonize these two monitoring systems, and we are promoting these washing school at a larger scale, as a bigger scale, no? Because we have the plan as such. Therefore, we'll certainly just scale up from taking off to the higher level, no? Taking off to the higher stage in 1 or 2 years of time. We have some learnings as well. If there is time, then I can brief it.
Yeah, I think there's time, and we also want to make sure we give time for Ghana to speak, Pakwasi,
Yeah,
and others. So, but please go ahead. And if for those who have to go, can go. But those who would like to stay on, we can hold on for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Please continue. It's very interesting.
Yeah. I think our learning working on this wash in school is that if there is functional school wash coordination committee, child club, and motivated teacher, then the success will be sure while implementing wash in school program. Similarly, we support the schools to make the infrastructure. But the thing is that what type of infrastructure we are building, if that is not consulted with the teachers or the students, then that will be of no use in the future. Therefore, design of wash facility, if it is consulted with the teachers and these students, that will help to ensure use and maintaining the facilities. Similarly, operation and maintenance, school being a public place, is very challenging. Therefore, if the training orientation is provided to the support staff with some tools, we have found it very much useful that is small repair and maintenance work will be carried out by the support staff, and there will not be need of these external resource person. Similarly, the repair and maintenance of these existing wash facilities requires more time and resources than building new one, no? Because we have very limited resources to build the new infrastructure, and we want to improve whatever is available. Therefore, improving will be time taking as well as this not so much cost effective. The third is about the other point is about working alone. Rather than working alone, if we work together with the education sector and other sectors,
Absolutely.
in these schools, then that
Mhm.
will help to promote these to sustain our activities.
Yeah.
And
Can you
yeah,
just wrap it up?
yeah,
Maybe the last
yeah,
one, so I can just
yeah,
give a
yeah,
chance because we have to close off in a few minutes. So I think we close off at the quarter
yeah,
after the hour.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
just want to make sure others get
and
a chance. Is there
yeah,
possible,
and
actually, is
monitoring.
it the
Yeah,
monitoring? Is it
yeah,
possible that
monitoring. Yeah,
the if you have a document that you can share or a PowerPoint presentation, I would definitely like, because I do feel like Nepal
yeah,
is one of those takeoff countries which is really going to
type
be
of countries.
established. But
Yeah,
it would be great, maybe in a perhaps future, we can share a bit more on Nepal. And because you also have the subnational government, local government, there was a lot of reforms around local government management of around WinS. So I think this would be very interesting too, in terms of of some things to share. So would you be
yeah.
able to share
Okay, okay,
that, and
okay,
maybe
okay.
any document? But I really do appreciate the team from Nepal, those joining, for sharing this. So if I could then ask Pakwasi to speak, please.
Hi.
Mhm.
Yes, I'm just
Thank
going
you.
to keep it very short, Belinda, because I'm
Thank
sure
you.
a lot of colleagues. I just wanted to highlight another thing about context that we
Mhm,
noticed from our discussion about the TSA is the
mhm.
need to also understand the political context. Yes, because in Ghana, the key issue was political context from the Ministry of Education. And even now, we are looking at ways to explore and moving towards a sort of progressive system and building up with our MS, ways to track that system and so on. And I think for us, one thing that we've had a discussion in the sector, one thing that is useful is maybe Ministry of Education to Ministry of Education bilateral meetings with countries that have taken off, to really, so that you really have a common understanding and understand the benefits, because sometimes internally within country it can seem like an owner imposition, which was how it seemed when it was trying to be integrated into our policy guidelines. Because we have the policy guidelines already and they don't touch on TSA, um, but we do have bits and pieces of the enabling environment in place. And it means that we have to go back to policy, to Ministry of Education level, and look at that. But I think the process of the research was very useful to us as a country. And Ellen and I were just discussing a way to develop a roadmap to sort of take a second look at TSA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pakwasi, for sharing, and also for Ellen for your comments. And I think we now have about 1 minute, and you know what? I'm giving that 1 minute to you, Kenneth. Kenneth, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Professor Kenneth Yongabi, Imo State University, Nigeria. So I just want to, I work on water purification. So I've been implementing Moringa sand filter systems in schools, in primary and secondary schools in Nigeria, of course, in Cameroon. I don't know if you, so I'm very interested in the TSA. Wonderful presentation. And I was wondering if you have expansion of this project in Nigeria. But then I'm also wanted to add very quickly that it would be nice to have a health literacy incorporated into TSA. I work a lot on health literacy, and I've developed a water conservation health literacy for schools in Nigeria. And that's going to be very interesting. And then we work already on a bio toilet where we take away odor from latrines using biomaterials, and then we reduce the biomass from schools, from toilets in schools. I'm preparing natural hand sanitizers for these kids in school. So
Perfect.
I'm very happy. I'll leave it very short here because of time, but it would be nice to incorporate health literacy and this little technologies that are built and within the reach of the children to address economic determinants issues that may affect the effective implementation of TSA. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and I'm really impressed that we have so many people from different aspects, whether it's research, innovation, technologies here. We will have to close it because it is now 10:15. I just wanted to share with you that the actual presentation, both in French and English, is on the WinS website. But what we want to just say again is that it's very much, I think Pakwasi, you said it beautifully, it's context. So what is available at the country context to really help then establish what are the benchmarks, what are the technologies the countries can take to move to the to a national level. But most important, integrate this within the national system, take a system approach to it, and monitor. Monitoring, it has to be linked to monitoring so we can make sure that the resources that are invested in those most needed. So thank you all for the contributions from Nepal, Uganda, Ghana, and also Nigeria. Thank you very, very much. Have a great day. And the recording will be available online for those of you who missed it. The Francophonies, merci beaucoup and bonne journée. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.